hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about the HOA that is demanding that I give them rooms in my house. The first letter showed up the same day a bobcat decided my chicken coop was an all-you-can-eat buffet. I was still picking feathers out of my hair when I opened an envelope stuffed with legalese and laser-printed indignation. According to a Notice of Special Assessment and Space Allocation, I owed an organization I'd never joined 9 months of mandatory dues, and, here's the kicker, 3 rooms in my 5-room mountain house. They wanted to rent them on behalf of the community until my arrearages were satisfied. I actually laughed out loud, which made the remaining chickens scatter. I live at the tail end of a gravel switchback, on land I bought from a retired teacher who was more concerned about selling me her antique soap molds than disclosing any neighborhood politics. The deed was clean. No covenants on record, no recorded HOA, just trees, a creek, and a house with one stubborn window that never quite closes. My place is mine, and I like it that way. The letter insisted that the prior owner had opted out, which they claimed triggered an emergency reallocation clause, requiring the next owner to compensate for withdrawn membership. The clause wasn't attached. The only thing attached was an invoice that looked like a ransom note drawn by a bored accountant. The numbers were big enough to make me swallow, but the premise was so silly I figured a phone call could clear it up. The association office was a glorified shed near the mailboxes down the mountain. Think stale coffee, a faded flag, and a whiteboard calendar with nothing but board meeting 6 p.m. written on every Wednesday. Inside sat Marla, a woman whose eyebrows were so arched they looked like quotation marks. Beside her was Deke, a guy built like a bowling pin in a camo jacket, and Pastor Glenn, who looked like he was only there for the donuts. None of them were there for me. "You're in arrears," Marla said before I even sat down. "I'm not a member," I said, still standing. "And neither was Miss Clay, the woman I bought from. She left." "Right," Deke said. "And when she left, you came. That's how chairs work. Somebody leaves the table. The new guy sits." "What table?" I asked. "What are you even talking about?" "Community needs," Pastor Glenn said soothingly. "Road maintenance, snow plowing, fire mitigation. We're short since Miss Clay left, so we rebalanced. Those extra bedrooms of yours can help us cover the gap. Airbnb traffic is strong out here. Easy fix." I stared at them. "You want to rent out 3 rooms in my house that I live in to cover fees for an association I'm not part of?" Marla clicked a pen with violent efficiency. "That's the proposal. We sent the notice certified. You have 15 days to comply before we escalate." "What happens at escalation?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't doing any of this. "We sue," Deke said, chewing a toothpick like it owed him money, "and we put a lien on your property." "You can't put a lien on property without a contract or a recorded covenant," I said, and they blinked at me like I'd switched to Klingon. "I may live in the woods, but I grew up with a paralegal mom and a dad who considered civil procedure bedtime reading. Ever hear of privity? Running with the land? No? Okay." Pastor Glenn smiled in the way pastors smile when they're about to suggest you pray on it. "Let's not get adversarial. We can offer you a membership packet, $50 initiation, and we'll waive the late fees if you open the rooms for 3 months." There it was, a shakedown wrapped in a hug. I told them I'd pass. They told me I'd regret it. I told them I'd see them in court if they tried. They told me court is expensive. I told them, "For you." I went home, fixed the chicken coop with hardware cloth, and figured that was the end. It wasn't. A week later, I got served. The complaint was filed in county court, signed by a lawyer named 2 first names. Never a good sign. It demanded unpaid assessments, enforcement of an occupancy allocation, and, for good measure, specific performance compelling me to hand over keys to 3 rooms. They attached a blurry scan of something titled Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, CC&Rs, that had my address scribbled in with a pen. No clerk stamp, no recordation number, no signature from me or from Miss Clay for that matter. I drove to the recorder's office and asked the clerk, Betty, a woman who wore bifocals on a chain, if she could find any CC&Rs for my parcel. She spun her chair, typed like she was mad at the keyboard, and said, "Nope, nothing. You got an easement for the utility line and a partial release of a deed of trust from 2009. That's it." She showed me the screen. No covenant. "They're suing me over a document that doesn't exist," I said, half to Betty, half to myself. "People sue over ghosts all the time," she said, giving me a pity smile. "You need help?" Her grandson had just passed the bar. She gave me his card. I stuck it in my pocket because I like free advice even when I think I don't need it. Back home, I did what any stubborn hermit with Wi-Fi does. I read every rule of civil procedure for our state, every statute on HOAs, and a handful of cases where judges had smacked fake associations with sanctions. I also called Miss Clay. She picked up on the second ring, still apparently hoarding artisan soap. "Oh, they're still at it?" she asked when I explained. "Honey, they tried to get me to pay mile fees for not waving at cars. I left that circus. I recorded my withdrawal letter with the county. You can find it under my name." She was right. Another trip to Betty, another spin of the chair, and there it was. Notice of withdrawal from unincorporated association. Recorded. Miss Clay wasn't subtle. She cited case law in her notice. The woman was a retired teacher, but apparently she taught civics. I made copies of everything. Then I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to inspect your property for rentable space. Friday, 10 a.m. Don't interfere." It was signed, Board. "Interfere?" I muttered. "Buddy, I'll interfere with a pot of coffee and a camera." Friday came. So did they. Marla, Deke, and a guy I hadn't met before who introduced himself as Rusty, the property manager. Rusty's shirt had a logo that looked suspiciously like something he airbrushed himself. They tried to march past me like I was a doormat. I stepped in front of the door and held up my phone. "Notice you are trespassing. Leave now. This is recorded." Marla waved a stack of papers. "We have the right to inspect common assets." "There is nothing common about my assets," I said. "You have 10 seconds to get off my porch before I call the sheriff." Deke snorted. "Sheriff's my cousin." "Then he'll really enjoy seeing the footage," I said. But my heart ticked faster. I knew how small counties work. Cousins matter. So does paper. Good thing I had it. "You have no recorded right of entry. This is trespass. I will seek damages." Pastor Glenn wasn't there to soothe anyone. Rusty decided bluster was better than logic. "We'll just get a court order." "Great," I said. "Bring it. Until then, step." They left, but not before Rusty took photos of my porch furniture. I deleted the footage of my own address number from the video before I sent it to a friend, call her Penny, who ran a blog about rural nonsense. She asked if she could blur my face and post it. I said no, for now. I didn't want to escalate before the judge saw it. Penny said, "Let me know. My readers love a good imaginary HOA saga." I said I'd keep her posted. 2 days later, I found a cheap wireless camera mounted on a tree facing my house. The brand was whatever you find at a gas station. They'd zip-tied it like a toddler tying shoes. I plucked it down, pulled the SD card, and after wondering if I was about to star in my own low-budget horror movie, popped it into my laptop. Hours of my driveway. Me hauling feed. Me taking out trash. Me doing yoga on the porch and realizing I should close the curtains more often. I boxed the camera, wrote "Found Trespass Device" on the cardboard in Sharpie, and dropped it on the step of the association office. No note, just the box. Then I drove straight to the sheriff's office. Since cousin or not, I wanted something on record. The deputy who took my statement asked how to spell trespass. I spelled it. He typed slowly. "We'll make a report," he said, like he'd just promised me a sticker. That night I emailed the attorney on the complaint. I kept it polite. That's important. "Dear Mr. Two First Names, I am not now, nor have I ever been a member of your client's purported association. Please see attached deed, recorder's record showing no CC&Rs and Miss Clay's recorded withdrawal. Your complaint is frivolous. I will be seeking attorney's fees under our state statute if you do not dismiss within 10 days. Additionally, your clients have trespassed and attempted to install surveillance on my property. Govern yourself accordingly." He wrote back one line, "We'll see you in court." Okay, court it is, time to escalate my own way. The grandson lawyer, Evan, met me at a coffee shop that served oat milk and opinions. He looked 12, but his eyes had the dead calm of someone who'd read too many depots already. "They filed in county court," he said, tapping his tablet. "We can remove to circuit because the amount in controversy crosses the threshold. Bigger judge, more formal, higher chance of sanctions. We can also counterclaim for trespass, invasion of privacy, and abuse of process." "How much to have you do that?" I asked, blunt because my budget was more chicken feed than lawyer fee. "Tell you what," he said. "I need trial experience. You're organized. If you're willing to do legwork, filings, drafting under my supervision, I'll bill you a flat $5,000. If we hit fees, we go after them." I considered. $5,000 was a hit, but losing my house, or even spending months with strangers rotating through my guest rooms because Deke thought I should, was a bigger hit. I shook his hand. We filed the removal. We answered. We counterclaimed. We also filed an anti-SLAPP motion based on our state's law against using lawsuits to chill property rights. SLAP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. It's usually for speech, but our statute had wiggle room about petitioning government. The HOA had complained to zoning about me operating an illegal lodging house already. Zoning had sent me a friendly warning that I ignored because, again, I wasn't. So we rolled that into the SLAP. If we won, mandatory fees. Evan drafted a motion to dismiss on the grounds that there was no contract, no recorded servitude, and the association wasn't incorporated. Their bylaws were on a Word doc with Comic Sans headings. I almost felt bad. Almost. Discovery started. That's when things got salty. We requested all documents related to my property, membership lists, and any proof of covenant. They responded with a thumb drive containing random PDFs, grocery receipts for board snacks, and a membership list that was basically names scribbled on notebook paper. No addresses, no signatures. One entry literally said, "Guy with dog." Evan laughed so hard he choked. We also deposed Marla. It was my first time sitting through a deposition that wasn't on TV. Evan was steady. "Miss Marla, can you point to the recorded document that binds my client's property to your association?" She smiled like she was on a game show. "Our bylaws say—" "Not my question," Evan said. "Recorded document with the county, runs with the land. Can you?" She looked at her lawyer, two first names, who glanced at his notes like they'd sprout an answer. "We believe—" "Objection non-responsive," Evan said, looking at the court reporter who kept a poker face like only a court reporter can. "Answer the question, Miss Marla. Can you?" "No," she said finally, small voice. I felt something unfurl in my chest. Not victory, not yet, but something like it. Next came Deke. He fidgeted the whole time. He also admitted that he put the camera in the tree. "It was Rusty's idea," he said. "We just wanted to see how many people came and went." "How many people come and go from your house daily?" Evan asked. Deke shrugged. "Dunno, couple buddies, UPS. So if I install a camera pointing at your driveway to count them, you'd be fine with that?" Deke blinked. "That'd be weird." "Exactly. Pastor Glenn skipped his depot. He couldn't leave the soup kitchen. Evan didn't push because we had enough. Plus we got Rusty, who melted under the lights. I thought we had authority," he kept saying. Marla said we did. When Evan showed him the lack of recorded documents, he just shook his head and muttered, "Man, I'm going to need to call my insurance." Meanwhile, life went on. My chickens regrew feathers. I upgraded the coop. I started getting weird calls asking if my house share rooms were available for summer. Someone had listed my address on a rental site. The listing photos looked like they were taken from my real estate listing when I bought the place. I contacted the platform. They took it down after I sent proof. But not before 3 cars drove up my driveway, suitcases in trunks and confusion on their faces. I politely explained and gave them a map to the nearest campground. One guy slipped me $20 for the trouble. I gave it to Penny for chicken feed. Penny started to smell a story again. I made her promise to wait. "After the judge," I kept saying. "Let me do this the clean way first." Then I found out about the side plot. My neighbor 2 lots down, Lenora, who wears overalls like an armor, came over with a pie and a heads up. "They tried to do it to me last year," she said, handing me blueberry like it was evidence. "Told me I owed road glitter fees for making the gravel too dusty with my truck. I told them where to stick it. They backed off because my brother's on the planning commission." "So it's not just me?" I asked, fork in hand because pie doesn't wait. "Nope. They prey on the loners, folks who don't come to meetings, folks who don't know the lingo. They even told old Mr. Bishop he had to paint his mailbox barn red to match community aesthetic. He's colorblind, bless him, painted it purple. They fined him till his daughter threatened to bring in a state senator. Good, pattern evidence. I asked if she'd sign an affidavit. She did with a grin. "And I'll bake for the hearing," she said. "Judges like pie." Evan filed motions. 2 first names filed oppositions that read like they were cribbed from a template for a real HOA. He kept calling them a non-profit corporation when they'd never filed articles. He kept referring to the board resolution of 2003 like it meant anything. He even cited a statute repealed in 2011. Evan highlighted that in neon yellow in our reply. Right before the hearing on our anti-SLAP motion, I got a certified letter with a red stamp. Emergency entry. It said that because I was non-compliant, the board had voted to change the locks on the allocated rooms and would be entering on Saturday with a locksmith. My hands shook when I read it. Fear is a funny thing. It feels a lot like anger, but colder. I called Evan. He said, "Stay calm. I'll file for a temporary restraining order right now." We did electronically. The judge, honest to goodness bless her, granted it ex parte Friday afternoon. I printed copies and taped one to my door, one to the association office, and one to the tree where the camera had been. Saturday morning, I sat on my porch with coffee and a copy of the order. At 9:17 a.m., a white van pulled up. Out stepped Rusty and a guy with a tool belt and the expression of someone who just wants to get paid. "Stop," I said, pointing to the paper. "Court order, you enter, you go to jail." Rusty squinted. "We already got a locksmith. He can turn around," I said. "He's getting paid either way." The locksmith read the order, shook his head, and said, "I'm not touching this." He left. Rusty cussed under his breath and drove off. I filmed the whole thing and emailed it to Evan. He replied with one word: perfect. At the hearing, two first names argued they had implied easements, equitable servitudes, and long-standing community expectations. Evan argued law. The judge leaned back, steepled her fingers, and asked two first names, "Where is the recorded instrument?" He floundered. She asked, "Why did your clients think they could enter this woman's home?" He said, "We had a board vote." She raised an eyebrow. "Sir, a board vote is not a warrant." She granted our anti-SLAPP motion. She dismissed their complaint without prejudice, but said if they refiled, she'd entertain sanctions. She set a separate hearing on our damages and fees. We'd have to prove our costs. I'd kept every receipt from printer ink to the gas to the recorder's office. Evan said, "You're my dream client." But I wasn't done, because there was still the matter of them listing my rooms, installing a camera, and lying to zoning. Plus, now that I knew they'd done this to others, I felt a moral itch. Not revenge. Okay, a little. But mostly, I didn't want the next person who bought land up here to get a space allocation notice with their morning coffee. So I got curious. I went to the Secretary of State website. I searched their association name. Nothing. I searched Marla's little Property Management LLC. Also nothing. I looked up their board minutes online. They had a GeoCities-era website with broken links. I found references to insurance and bonding. I called the insurance agency listed. The agent, a tired-sounding guy named Rob, said, "They haven't paid their premium since last summer. Policies lapsed. Bingo." I also contacted the fire district about their fire mitigation fees. The chief said, "We don't contract with HOAs. If they're collecting for us, that's news." He asked for documentation. I sent it. His eyebrows practically audibly raised over the phone. "We'll handle it," he said, and he did. A week later, a fire inspector visited the association office with a clipboard. I watched from my truck with binoculars like a nosy hawk. The inspector left looking smug. Word got around that the office failed their extinguisher check and wiring code. They had to close for remediation, which meant no Wednesday meetings, which meant their power base, which was mostly coffee and self-importance, fizzled. Meanwhile, Penny finally convinced me the story should go public. We sanitized personal info, blurred faces, and posted a write-up on her blog. We called it the HOA that wasn't, and left out identifying details. It went viral-ish. Enough that a consumer affairs reporter from a regional station emailed me. I said I'd talk after the fees hearing. She agreed. "We love paperwork," she said. "Judge's orders make for good B-roll." The night before the fees hearing, Marla left a voicemail on my phone. "We can settle," she said, voice cracking. "We'll drop everything if you drop yours." I saved it. Then I played it for Evan. "We'll consider it," he said, eyes glinting, "but only if they pay your costs and sign a consent judgment enjoining them from ever contacting you again." They balked. Of course they did. They thought settle meant we stop right now and forget the last 6 months happened. I thought settle meant you pay for my sleepless nights and the locks I had to replace after Rusty tried to jiggle them. The judge would decide. And I haven't even told you about the bears yet. That's another thread. Because while all this was happening, a black bear decided my compost bin was his personal spa. The the association, tried to blame me for attracting wildlife and claimed it violated community safety standards. I pointed out that their potluck left 3 whole pies unattended last summer, and the raccoons haven't forgotten either. But I'll get to the bear, and the mailbox, and the power outage that turned into a very satisfying bit of poetic justice. But I'm jumping ahead. The fees hearing was next. The courtroom was packed, because in a small county, drama is free entertainment. Lenora brought pie. Mr. Bishop, with the purple mailbox, came too. Evan presented our costs, laid out our time, and asked for statutory damages under the SLAPP law. 2 first names objected to everything, even my gas receipts. like I'd taken a private jet instead of a Subaru. The judge was patient until she wasn't. "I warned you," she said to two first names. "I told you to substantiate your claims. You didn't. Instead, your clients escalated. They attempted illegal entry. They installed surveillance. They misrepresented their authority to zoning and this court. I am awarding defendant her fees and costs in full. Additionally, I am imposing sanctions of $10,000 payable by the association to the court and $2,500 personally against counsel for filing a frivolous suit. You may seek contribution from your clients if you wish, but that's between you and them." Evan squeezed my arm. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since the Bobcat. The judge wasn't done. She granted our injunction. The association was barred from contacting me, listing my property, setting foot on my land, or purporting to exercise control over anything I own. Violation meant contempt. I walked out feeling lighter but still wired, because people like Marla don't give up. They regroup, they sulk, they scheme. I knew it wasn't over, not while they still had a shed and a whiteboard. I figured they'd turn their eyes to someone else. I wasn't wrong. That's when I met Jory. Jory introduced himself by launching a drone into my maple tree. I heard the whir, the thunk, and then a cuss that sounded like it had training wheels on it. I stepped outside to see a lanky guy in cargo shorts staring up at his stuck gadget like it might grow legs and climb down. "Want a ladder or an apology first?" I asked. He startled, then grinned. "Both? I'm Jory. I just closed on the A-frame at the bend. Somebody told me the association needed aerial footage of culverts, so I offered to help. Then someone else told me the association is made of hot air and copier paper. I figured I'd ask the expert." I laughed. "Expert in keeping strangers out of my attic, maybe. You were told right. They're not legit. Give me 10 minutes and a fruit picker." 10 minutes later, the drone was free. The maple was only mildly offended, and Jory was on my porch with iced tea. He'd been in the mountains 6 days and already had 3 conflicting welcome packets. One from a church, one from the volunteer fire brigade, and one handwritten bylaws pamphlet shoved under his windshield wiper that demanded a new arrival fee payable in cash or marketable goods. "They tried to bill you already?" I asked. "Oh yeah," he said. "I posted in the local forum asking about trash pickup, and Marla sent me a DM reminding me community ordinances prefer people keep 3 cans maximum and pay $5 per can to the board for bulk overflow." I responded with a gif of a raccoon digging in a dumpster and haven't heard back. "Give it time," I said. "They escalate like mold." We started comparing notes, his new owner packet versus my space allocation notice. It was like looking at fingerprints of the same greasy hand. He had an inspection form with Rusty's signature, telling him he had to neutralize his door color. He had a voicemail from Deke about mandatory roadwork days. He even had an invoice for an emergency culvert fund that, according to the county drainage office, didn't exist. Jory's eyes widened when I told him about the lawsuit. "They sued you to force you to hand over rooms?" he said, incredulous. "That's creative." "That's one word for it," I said. "Judge used frivolous. I prefer bonkers." Jory rubbed his chin. "What if, hear me out, we don't just swat them down in court? What if we turn the lights on so bright they can't regroup? Sunshine therapy." "Already planning," I admitted. "But careful. There's a line between exposing truth and making yourself a target." "My middle name is Target," he said. "Actually, it's Elliot, but still." Sunshine therapy started with paperwork. While Evan wrapped up the fee order, I filed complaints with the State Consumer Protection Division and the Attorney General's office. I sent copies of the judge's order, the fake invoices, the camera report, and affidavits from Lenora and Mr. Bishop. I didn't expect speedy action. State agencies move like glaciers. But putting them on record matters. Jory, being tech-minded, scraped the association's public posts, archived their minutes, and backed up everything in case they tried to sanitize after the fact. Meanwhile, the bear, I promised. Late August, compost bin humming, I woke at 2 a.m. to a heavy clunk. I looked out to see a black shape doing the waltz with my bin. I banged pots. Old camping trick. Bear looked at me like I was the entertainment and kept snacking. Next morning, I called the wildlife office, who recommended a bear-proof bin. I ordered one, cost more than my first car. The association saw the bear on someone's trail cam and immediately blasted out an email. "Resident at Lot 27 is attracting wildlife. This is a violation of safety standards. Board will levy a wildlife nuisance fine if it continues." I wrote back, reply all, bless the accidental transparency. "There are no enforceable safety standards. Consider this your notice to stop harassing me. Also, check your trash after potlucks. Pastor Glenn replied with a long moral treatise about stewardship. I almost appreciated it until the last line. Perhaps opening your home to short-term renters would bring more accountability. Accountability? For raccoons? I hit delete, then forwarded it to Evan for the file. A September windstorm cut the power. I lit candles, fed the wood stove, and listened to silence until the association office across the switchback buzzed like a UFO. Their generator rattled under someone's window, and an orange cord snaked over the public easement to Marla's cabin. They emailed, "Drop off 5 gallons to keep the community center running." Community center. My foot. It powered their snack fridge. Jory and I were on a call mapping their bogus fees when we saw the cord. "Fire hazard," he said. I rang the fire district. The same inspector rolled up, sliced the cord, cited them, and said, "Argue with me, not her." They still owed court sanctions in 30 days, so out went a special emergency assessment. $400 per household to cover the legal abuse of a rogue resident. Evan sent a cease and desist. When they coyly referenced an anonymous defendant, the judge added a $1,000 contempt fine. Broke, they tried selling things they didn't own, the scout troop's picnic table, the church's folding chairs. Pastor Glenn finally snapped. A retiree recorded one meeting. Marla hissed, "If she won't pay, we'll make her pay an inconvenience." Then they handled the mail. A flurry stranded deliveries, so the board sorted everyone's envelopes. Federal offense. Mr. Bishop found his VA check opened and roared. A postal inspector arrived. Blame ping-ponged until silence won. Jory filed IRS Form 13909 after spotting non-profit boasts with no filings. I went petty but legal. Every fake invoice got a debt validation demand. They ignored or doubled down. Evans stapled the pile to our contempt motion. Karma gusted in again. A dead lodge pole, Deke's road committee problem, fell onto their generator shed, cracked a fuel line, and lit a small fire. The crew contained it, but the walls scorched, the whiteboard melted, and our bear waddled through, scattering binders and leaving with a paper plate. Rusty got cited. Code enforcement red-tagged the shed. Last gasp, a GoFundMe whining about freeloaders and grifters. Locals roasted them. Lenora linked the judge's order. The platform yanked it at $82. Their lawyer quit. Marla tried pro se. The judge said an unincorporated blob can't sue. Case dismissed again. The Attorney General opened an investigation and ordered restitution. Neighbors filed claims. Small claims suits sprouted. Rusty paid with driveway work, Deke did brush clearing service, Glenn apologized, and folks stopped waving at Marla's Subaru. I breathed. Dawn hikes replaced briefs. Final tally? The court awarded me $18,432.17. I collected from their drained account, an equipment auction. Their whiteboard hangs in my shed. Plan, mind-own business, and a late cashier's check from Marla that I donated to the fire district. The AG forced them to disband. The postal inspector warned them. I celebrated with a room-warming party in the rooms they coveted. Chili, classic rock, a bear snuffle track. The fake emergency entry notice made a coaster. Certified mail still makes me flinch, but life's back to mountain normal. The tree that once held their spy cam is sprouting new growth, so am I, and that feels downright peaceful. Friends, thank you. See you soon.